This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by nhliberty.org.
So
the charge I got itself was a violation, so it may have been just a violation.
I see.
But who knows?
You can get a ticket for whatever.
Yeah.
So then,
but I ended up taking this to the NYCLU, which is the New York State chapter of the American Civil Liberty Union. Mm-hmm. At first, they told me to scram. They said, "Well, if it's the law, it's the law. Well, there's nothing we can do." But apparently, I'd gone to the wrong people. About 2 weeks later, I got a call back, and they said they were interested in my case. There was actually another case that they had that was similarly sympathetic, but not quite as sympathetic as my own, and eventually that case was dropped. I'm not sure why.
So did you file suit?
Yes, we filed a civil lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security and Janet Napolitano.
Did the NYCLU pay for this?
Yes.
Lawsuit? Okay.
Yeah, they covered all the costs. They said offhand, I think they said it would cost them about $25,000.
Wow.
But so that was our lawsuit against the DHS, the Federal Protective Services, and the arresting officers happened. We put in the lawsuit on April 22nd of this year, and as of Friday, a settlement was reached and signed by a judge that basically did a couple things. One, it had the DHS and the government admit that what they did was inappropriate, that the regulation does not, in fact, cover those things.
So what they did was inappropriate in that they arrested you for whatever the heck the charge was, and then that was completely inappropriate of them.
Right. So
okay.
the regulation is not to be interpreted that way. That was a misunderstanding. Normal, but trying to get out of responsibility. They basically said it was a misunderstanding.
Is this binding on them? Is this settlement binding on them, or is it just get you out of whatever the charges were?
Well, the charges against me had already been dropped.
I see. Sorry.
This was an additional lawsuit against them for basically infringement of my First Amendment.
So does the settlement basically include a judge's order against them saying that they cannot do this anymore, or is it that they could still do it in the future and then have to go through this process again?
Well, it's not the same as like a judge ruling against them, but it is them admitting that they screwed up, that this is not what this regulation means. It also has provisions that they have 60 days to issue an educational document, basically instructions to all federal employees who enforce these regulations that this is the case. And if they don't do it within 60 days and provide evidence, then we can turn around and sue them again.
I see. So,
my goodness. Bile, you've changed the world.
We should start quizzing them. We should go to where they work and quiz them on what they've read.
Now, this is specifically regarding the regulations about people filming on federal property?
Actually, the settlement covers only federal courthouses, but the regulation itself, to quote the settlement real quick, it says that particular regulation does not, quote, prohibit individuals from photographing, including motion photography, the exterior of federal courthouses from publicly accessible spaces such as streets, sidewalks, parks, and plazas. The Federal Protection Service has not construed any other federal regulation or federal statute to prohibit such photography of exterior federal courthouses, though it makes no representation for local rules, meaning that while they can't speak for local court rules, there is no federal law that they know of that would prohibit filming on federal courthouse property.
And the Department of Homeland Security has been instructed to notify all of their federal courthouse enforcers about this particular settlement, right?
Right. Anyone who this regulation falls under, they have 60 days to issue them an instruction flyer or whatever it is, indicating that this is explicitly the case that photographers can film. And the settlement also goes on to say that they're still able to go up to you and question you and investigate and all that kind of
sure, and you
stuff.
Don't have to answer any of their questions. You're never under obligation to answer these bureaucrats' questions, because as we've seen, when you provide them with information, they frequently will use it to find a reason to arrest you. So the less information you give, the better off you tend to be.
Now, you got a $1,500 sort of punitive settlement out of these guys. I think it pretty much goes without saying that this $1,500 will not be coming out of the paychecks of the guards that took these rules out of context and used them against you, right? I mean, this is taxpayer money, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, I suspect that's the case. There is some specifics if you look at the settlement about where the money actually comes from. So if someone wants to do the investigative research to find out exactly where that fund within the FPS or the DHS how that gets filled, that could be interesting. But it's not just the $1,500. There's an additional $3,350 to help cover legal fees, but those go to the NYCLU.
This edition of the Ridley Report was brought to you by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance at nhliberty.org. If you were to go to the State House and do this, then you would step on the toes of a Liberty Alliance member, because they're all over the place at the State House. They are there fighting for your freedom, and they need your help. Visit the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance at nhliberty.org and join them. Or maybe I should say, join us, because I am a member. nhliberty.org. By the way, if you haven't moved to New Hampshire yet, this is just another glimpse of what you're missing.